Let's talk real quickly about one of the things that I see a lot of people struggle with, and that is building a proper tinder bundle. If you remember the fire triangle, it's heat, it's fuel, it's air, all three of those working together. Your tinder is where that heat actually meets the fuel. Taking the time to make sure that it's ready, you know, that fuel, that smallest, most well-processed, finest material you have is processed in such a way to readily accept the heat, will save you a lot of time and a lot of effort going back and you know, re-engaging your ignition source, especially when we're talking about friction fire. You're going to put some effort into that. I won't say that it's necessarily as hard as everyone makes it out to sound, especially as you get a few reps under your belt, but it does take some effort. It does take some calories. So what you don't want to do is end up, you know, going through that amount of effort, spending those calories, and getting a nice little ember from a bow drill, for example, and you know, have that tinder bundle not be ready to accept that little ember and create a fire. If you just take a little bit of time and process this down and understand how it should be constructed for any fire, I think it'll save you a lot of time and a lot of effort, you know, going back and redoing it. It's kind of that old saying, you know, you don't have time to do it right, but you always end up having time to do it again. When we're talking about a tinder bundle, we're talking about going from the most coarse material to the outside, all the way into a medium, to a fine, to even a super fine material in the very center. And the reason we do that is because we're going to apply our heat, our ember, whatever it is we use, directly in the center at the finest material. As that heat is transferred and that tinder ignites, it's going to ignite and or dry out. You know, if you have damp or moist tinder, it's going to dry out the next larger size, and on and on and on, until eventually you're getting into your kindling, then you're getting into your sustaining fuel. So with that in mind, I've got some dried grasses, which, you know, are kind of unique, and we'll talk about those. And I've got a lot of inner barks and outer barks here. Let's see what I've got in here. This is definitely some cedar bark in here. Put that to the side. There's some cedar. This is some aspen. Probably a mix of aspens, cottonwood. I don't see any tulip poplar. Maybe a little bit of tulip poplar right here. Anyway, so I've got some barks. And when I'm talking about, you know, the coarse, medium, fine, super fine, I'm not so much talking about the density of material as it comes. I'm talking about how fine you're going to process it, with one exception. If I'm using grasses, which down here I don't have a lot of access to, you know, the prime inner and outer barks like you have in other areas of the country. So I'm kind of limited in how much actual bark I can get as far as inner and outer barks to make my tinder bundle. So I'm forced to use some dried grasses a lot of times. And you would think that these would be great, and they are for coarse material, but what most people don't understand is that if you've ever felt a straw bale before, or next time you see a dry piece of grass, you can feel that. And what you'll feel is a waxy cuticle. And this is something that land plants share in common. And what it does is it prevents evaporation of water. They're trying to retain moisture because they're, you know, trying to live on land. So a couple things that does, it prevents moisture from escaping as badly. So it makes it retain moisture on the inside as well. The other thing is because it's a wax, it's a solid wax, it takes a lot of heat to turn that solid wax into liquid form so that it can ignite. So knowing that up front, I'm never going to put the dried grass towards, you know, medium or the fine or super fine material. It's always going to be my outer coarse material, because I've got that chain going from my super fine to my medium, and then it finally gets out to my coarse. By the time it gets to this, I've got a lot of heat built up in that tinder bundle, and it'll have no problem igniting. It'll be fantastic for that. Now, if I was using an open flame ignition source like matches or a lighter, then that's a different story. You know, I could just, you know, make a grass bundle. I could directly light that, no problem. For today, we're going to be doing a bow drill a little bit later, so I want to kind of show you how to do it with that in mind, and just build a basic tinder bundle. So my coarse layer becomes my outer layer, and I'm trying to build kind of a bird's nest. And incidentally, a real bird's nest is almost perfect for this. It sometimes has some mud in it you got to knock out of it, but you know, I'm trying to mimic that when I'm creating my bird's nest tinder bundle. And when I get done with it, you know, it should literally look like a bird's nest. You know, it should look like a bird would be happy to lay an egg in it. But anyway, so my coarse outer layer, I'm going to use my grass because it has that cuticle. Now, this kind of a selection of barks here, this is not necessarily as is. I could put this on the outside and it would be coarse material. But there are so many big kind of chunky portions of this. It hasn't been processed down. This isn't ready. You know, it's not finely processed like I want it to be. It's not ready to accept that heat readily. I might get lucky, but I'm not trying to be lucky. I'm trying to get this right. So what I can do with this stuff is, you know, kind of these bigger chunks here, and I'm doing this on a mat for a reason. You'll see why in a little bit, but I'll just kind of take those and I'll start twisting and breaking those up into tiny little fibers. I want this tinder to be finer than frog hair, and that's pretty fine. So I'm breaking this down, kind of shredding it up. And right now I'm working on, you know, going from my coarse to my medium material. So I don't have to get too awful crazy with this, but I do want it to be, you know, what I would consider medium. So after I've twisted it a little bit, I'll start pulling the fibers apart, make sure I don't have any big chunks in there. And this is really something you should take your time with. It should take you a few minutes to build a proper tinder bundle. If you rush it, you know, and try to shortcut it, then you take a chance of your ignition source not taking and having to do it all over again. So I just take a little bit extra time and try to get it right from the start. And as you can see, I got this chamois down, and it's actually catching all this super fine material that's coming off this bundle. Just keep breaking it down. Take your time. And when we're talking about our medium material, you know, we're really looking at you know, pencil lead size or so, with some exceptions. There's going to be some bigger pieces in there. I've got this process down pretty good to what I would consider a medium material. And because this is bark and not a dried grass, it doesn't have a cuticle that I have to worry about. And this is going to actually burn better than the grass because it doesn't have that cuticle. And I'm going to take that, this is my medium material, I'm going to take that medium material, I'm going to stick it right down in that nest on the inside with the coarse grass on the outside. Now what I can do is just kind of gather this material up that broke off of it. Just kind of lightly go over it. And I can add that to the pile as well. And that's got all the little tiny pieces that fell off incorporated into it. And that leaves me with some really fine like dust that's going to be really valuable. So be a little more aggressive with this to get those little tiny particles up. And I'm going to put those right in the center. But I want to gather up all these goodies, minus the pine needles. I don't want those. Gather up all this dust here, because that dust is super fine. I don't want to lose that. Put that right in there. Let's see if I can get this to go. All right, good enough. Now, the cedar bark is unique. This is an outer bark instead of an inner bark that I got with all those other ones. When I'm making my fine material, you really can't beat cedar outer bark Juniper, same family. A lot of times the same tree as well. People just call them something different. But cedars, junipers, and the tulip poplars. This is the stuff that you can really get nice and fine. And you can see how long I'm taking to do this. I'm doing this, you know, deliberately. I want this thing to be perfect because this isn't the part that takes effort. This is leisurely. And when I'm talking about processing it down fine as frog hair, I'm going to set off a little bit to the side. This is what I would consider fine material right here. Processed pretty fine. That goes to the center. And I set aside just a little bit more that I can process down even further. Until it's hair-like. And then with that, I'm going to place that in the very center. Let's talk quickly while I'm scooping this up. Nothing different than what I was doing before. While I'm scooping this stuff up, let's talk quickly about size of a tinder bundle. For good weather like we have today, I like to make my tinder bundles the size of a miniature basketball, you know, a little bit larger than a softball. This is a good size for fair weather like I'm having today. If for some reason the weather wasn't as good as it is right now, then I would want to be about twice this size, almost a full basketball size. That allows this time to actually dry out and heat up and last long enough to get maybe some marginal, some damp, some moist kindling that would be my next step after this to catch. So it's important to make your tinder bundle correct so that you don't have to waste time doing it again. And once you're done with it, it should look like a bird's nest with super fine material in the center. That's what you're going for. This is going to be a good tinder bundle.